Nowadays, we take the MCU for granted. There's so many superhero movies coming out, so many different adaptations of the characters we love being released from 2008 to 2025 and beyond, right? But everyone forgets the original superhero franchise. And no, I'm not talking about Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. I'm going to talk about the Fox X-Men movies. This series is a series that is often forgotten about for little to no reason. The reason the series is forgotten about is because, quite honestly, it's a very forgettable series. There are a few hidden gems here and a few movies that I would argue are good when others would argue they're bad. But the overall fan consensus on these 12 movies is that they were trash. But do I agree? You have to wait to find out. So yeah, I'm Joshua Martin from The Might Reviews, and I recently watched all 12 Mainline X-Men movies. So let's talk about it.
Let's fucking go.
But before we start the actual talking about the movies, what is the X-Men series? The X-Men series was a try to adapt the X-Men comics into live action for a general audience. And you can tell this, especially with the earlier movies. The movies that were released first appealed to a normal audience. And yeah, they didn't really feel like X-Men. They were meant to appeal to people who didn't really understand superhero movies. Because I remember at the time, I give Tobey's movies a lot of flack, but they were a big part in introducing superhero movies to the general audience. They didn't have that back in 2000. So this series had to evolve and kind of not use the source material. In fact, the director was so upset about source material that he banned comic books on set, which is insane. And Kevin Feige, fun fact, he was working on this movie, first project ever, had to sneak comics in for Hugh Jackman, which is wild. But this video, I'm going to talk about all 12 mainline X-Men movies. The only movie I'm leaving out right now is going to be New Mutants, simply because it doesn't apply to the X-Men movies. It's its own separate thing with no references, no talking about anything. I also, call me a wimp in the comments, I guess, but I'm not into horror movies. And 3, it's apparently like the worst one, and I don't really want to torture myself. There's no positives with the exception of a big number in the thumbnail. So I'm not gonna talk about it. But yeah, let's start off with the first movie in the timeline. We're gonna be going by timeline, not by release date, simply because I want how these movies link together. And trust me, I have seen these movies, so timeline order is probably the best way to watch them, in my opinion. But yeah, with that information, we will be going in timeline order. But before we talk about our first movie, I just want to ask each and every one of you guys to subscribe and also like the video, because only 1.6% of you guys are subscribed, and that is a crazy metric. So if you subscribe and hit that bell and just show support for this video, because this video might have taken me 20, maybe 10 to 15 hours of editing to put together, and that would be greatly appreciated. But let's start off with X-Men First Class. X-Men First Class is a very interesting movie to me because, flat out, it's the most forgotten movie in the franchise, or at least to the main Fox movies. Because, simply put it does nothing special, doesn't grab your interests, and is just a blatant cash grab of an origin story. Yet, I honestly kind of enjoyed this movie. This movie is very weird because it feels hella 2000s, yet it came out in 2011, which is incredibly interesting to me that they went for this feel. Makes sense, but still. The reason this movie is forgotten is just because it's decent, but it makes some really, really weird story choices. Take Darwin's death. He's able to adapt to anything, yet they just kill him with a bomb, basically. Just so boring and generic, and they killed him simply to make Sebastian seem more powerful, yet he didn't really scare me at all. Darwin's death was just completely unnecessary and just so random for no reason. And Sebastian doesn't make a good villain. He's way better in X-Men the animated series and in X-Men 97. And he's just so boring here. He's such a generic villain, and he's basically, his whole plan is money, power, war, get rid of humanity. Just a worse version of Magneto. And they could have done a way better job at it. I like the plot idea of him inspiring Magneto. That was actually pretty cool, but the villain was terrible. There are also some other pretty bad things, like Beast becoming blue. Like, that's such a goofy way to explain it, how he wants to bang a chick, so he becomes blue. I know it's more complicated than that. He wants her to be normal again like him, but it's just, they did it much better in the comics. It was just a failed experiment. Leave it at that. You don't need to explain it much more. Although I did appreciate them showing out what happened in this movie. Just, yeah, but although I just criticized the movie for a little bit, honestly, this movie has its redeeming qualities. Magneto and Eric are amazing. Really, they seriously are. Seeing how Eric became Magneto was just really, really freaking cool. Seeing how he was in the Holocaust, massive fan of World War II history. It's just cool to see that stuff play out in a big Hollywood movie. I love it being tied to a big villain like Eric, aka Magneto. And I like seeing the distinction about just, it makes you feel like he's right. But at the same time, I liked the distinction between Magneto and Charles' methods. Magneto rips metal teeth out, interrogates, kills. Charles wants to see humans do good. He wants to help them. He doesn't want to curse humanity to go back to the way they were before. He wants them to become better, kind of like X-Men 97. And it shows, the movie really shows why they fight, and I just really, really enjoyed that about this movie. I also think the cast was just really, really, honestly not bad. The cast is made up of James McAvoy, who does Professor X, Michael Fassbender, who does Eric, not even going to try to pronounce that last name, and others like Kevin Bacon, Jennifer Lawrence, Nicholas Hoult, and January Jones. Just some pretty, honestly, not bad actors. The cast here was pretty good. In particular, James and Michael do a really good job of performing their characters like they did in the original movies. They feel like younger versions of the people in X-Men, X-Men 2, and X-Men Last Stand. And I had a lot of fun watching their old cast, right? They're good actors, and I'm happy they come back in 2 other movies, because they're the best parts of those movies. But they also have really good banter, Professor X and Magneto. And yeah, besides that, what did I find good about this movie? I liked the dream of the X-Men. I liked how the X-Men very foundations were built here. I liked the explanations of certain characters. But overall, this movie really only gets like a 7 out of 10 from me, simply because it's not like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 1, which I know I've been one to hate that movie, but it's okay. I can put aside its cheesiness because it has some in-depth parts, and it's also was made in 2000, like around the early 2000s, so it makes sense. This movie was literally released in 2011, and it's just so incredibly cheesy, and it's not good for the time period it came out. Days of Future Past, which is my opinion, at least prior to watching it, was my favorite X-Men movie to ever be released, and the one I kind of grew up with. That movie came out like 4 years later, which is crazy. So final thoughts on First Class. I thought it was an enjoyable enough movie if you don't dive too much into it. It's honestly not that bad of a family. I mean, actually, it's not that's not true. The strip club scenes are kind of not good for kids. But I thought it's an enjoyable movie to watch if you don't look too deep into it. It's definitely in the better half of the X-Men movies. It's worth watching in my opinion, and it's not bad at all. But yeah, with the most forgotten X-Men movie out of the way, let's talk about another forgotten X-Men movie. X-Men Origins Wolverine. X-Men First Class was incredibly generic, and I can see the same exact thing for X-Men Origins Wolverine. I saw this movie 2 days ago, and I've already forgotten everything about it. Now, this is somehow... First Class was a generic movie. It really was. It was super generic, but it had some enjoyable elements. Origins is a lot worse in my opinion, at least for me personally. Like, for example, taking a certain scene from the movie, him killing his father at the very beginning. They try to show emotion, they try to show a difference between him and Sabretooth, but it just falls flat, man. That feels hella 2001, even though this movie was made in the 2009. And it was incredibly cheesy, right? Like, why? I also just didn't like the acting for the kid actors, I'm not gonna lie. It's unlike Magneto from First Class, the kid actors were just not good at all. Like the fake cries, it's not a good thing. The story is also incredibly messy, right? First act, Wolverine dealing with the military, he gets called in, and then he's living his normal life. Act 2 is him getting the adamantium, getting double-crossed, and then finding Gambit, who sucked, by the way, and them going to fight Sabretooth and then them finding a terrible version of Deadpool and Sabretooth and Wolverine. I did enjoy that part. I enjoyed Sabretooth and Wolverine teaming up. I also did enjoy the explanation of the necklace and how Logan forgot his memories. That was actually a good explanation. But man, this movie in particular, First Class didn't do a great job at this, but X-Men, this movie in particular, or Wolverine Origins, butchered Gambit and Deadpool. Gambit was less so. The actor still did what he best what he could. I still liked the VFX for the cards. I still liked the bow staff and his acrobaticness. But Deadpool, Oh my god, did they butcher Deadpool? Like, it is not even funny, bro. Ryan Reynolds, I haven't seen... I'm going to talk about the Deadpool movies later. But let me just give you a little hint. Yeah, Ryan Reynolds was born for this role. Even in X-Men Origins Wolverine, he did the best he could with the acting. At the very beginning, Wade was very funny. He really was. I had a lot of fun watching him. This is my first experience with Deadpool, because prior to this video, I had never seen the Deadpool movies. But yeah, I loved Wade. It was the best part, in my opinion. I think, of course, Hugh Jackman obviously is as good as always. He's amazing here. But Wade might have been the best actor in the movie, in my opinion. But man, I just really didn't like Deadpool. The power set, the skills, how he didn't talk, I don't care about comic accuracy, but you can at least try to look like the character. Take the Flash from example from Zack Snyder's Justice League. At least that one looks like the Flash. This guy just looks like a generic mercenary. It's just so bad. It's just ugh. One thing I will say, another criticism I have with this movie is just the cheesy dialogue. Like, for example, Hugh Jackman is an amazing actor. He really is. He's a great actor. Every single movie I've watched, he's just done an outstanding job. But he was given such a bad script this time around, man. For example, when the General is giving Logan the adamantium prior, he says this line.
I can give you the tools to defeat him.
I can give you the tools to defeat him. This is set around the middle of X-Men Origins Wolverine, and kind of it's like right before the General gives Logan the claws. And man, it just did not resonate. Not a great line. Just the dialogue in general just was terrible. This in general, the script just was very cheesy, generic, boring. It felt like a very generic but still terrible superhero movie. And yeah, last criticism, I do want to say that this movie left no impact on me. It's not like a First Class where I liked Magneto. It's not like, as a little spoiler alert, it's not like X-Men United where I liked Crawler and I liked the acting of Cyclops a little bit in that movie. I just like no impact here. I also didn't like the way the X-Men... I thought the inclusion of the X-Men at the very end, decent explanation, but it was very convenient that Professor Charles didn't see Logan, or that Gambit walks away, or how Cyclops just happened to be there. You know what I mean? It was way too convenient. It just did not leave for good storytelling. The movie in general was undercooked. There's Logan, leaving the massacre. There was no impact with that. I wish he had, objected a few times, kept going through with it, and then maybe he had hated himself. That would have been nice. But nah, instead he just leaves. It was very undercooked. Although I will say, I liked how they showed his age and how he fought in the military. I liked his bone claws. I liked the way Logan was portrayed here. I didn't like the movie. I didn't like Deadpool. I didn't like the bad guy. Very generic. Stryker was very generic. But I did like the way Wolverine was portrayed. That's the only good thing about this movie is the acting and how, from certain people, Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds in particular. And I really, really liked the way that in general Wolverine was portrayed. That was good. But yeah, this movie was okay. Definitely not great. Okay, X-Men Origins Wolverine was not a good movie. But maybe X-Men will be better. This is a movie I have a complicated relationship with. As a kid, I watched X-Men The Last Stand and X-Men 2 United. I probably saw X-Men 2 20, maybe 30 times. And I probably saw Last Stand about 15, 20 times over a course of a year. This movie, though, I didn't really watch this movie a lot. So it was a joy to rewatch it. I remembered the Statue of Liberty, but I completely forgot about Rogue. I remembered Hugh Jackman, obviously, because he's one of the best actors ever. But I forgot completely about Cyclops. And yeah, this movie's definitely not terrible, but it's also not great. If I had to compare this movie to an MCU movie, which I'm going to do throughout this video because MCU is the closest thing, I would liken it to Captain America the First Avenger. Not badly written, not terrible, but fundamentally flawed and really boring to watch. But there are some things I really enjoyed about this movie. Take, for example, Magneto, child actor at the very beginning. I know I said this with First Class, but I like the Holocaust being mentioned in movies, and it was just cool. The child Magneto actor struck me as very, very well done. I also want to reiterate, the cast here is very, very good. Patrick as Professor X is amazing. Hugh Jackman is amazing. The actor for Jean is not terrible. Rogue is okay. I just wish he had a heavier accent. But I did really, really like the acting in this movie. I also liked, and I'm a sucker for the Magneto and Professor X banter. I think it's done best in this movie. It was decent in First Class, probably the best part of that movie. But it's great here, the way they play chess, the way they mentally know each other super well. Yeah, they're just at odds. They're friends, but they're on an opposite side of the war, and they can't really afford to be friends. Once again, Hugh Jackman is absolutely amazing as Wolverine. I think everyone knows that. I really enjoyed, there are certain things I really enjoyed about this movie. It's better, definitely better than First Class and X-Men Origins Wolverine. There are some things I really liked about this movie beyond that, though. Rogue's powers were shown relatively well. I wish there was something beyond her victims just curling up. But I did like her powers. I also liked the adaptation of her kissing her first boyfriend, and that's when her discovers his powers. I'm a sucker for comic accurate origins here. It's great. Or at least, I don't know if it's comic accurate, but I saw it in X-Men in the animated series, so. This movie just feels incredible. Like that, for example, feels incredibly 2000s. This is when this movie released, so. I also liked the explanation of Logan's claws when he talks to Rogue in the van. That was pretty cool, how it hurts every time. That was great. This movie just feels like it's not the best adaptation of what I love about the X-Men, but honestly, I get it. Superhero movies weren't really popular at the time. This was around the same time as Sam Raimi, but before that, superhero movies weren't really in fashion, so this movie had a lot to cover. It really did. And that's why I'm okay. I'm so annoyed that there was no yellow spandex, and yes, Cyclops, I would prefer it to be yellow spandex. But, you know what I mean? It's not the worst. I don't mind the cheesiness here, because it works towards the story, and it's introducing an audience to X-Men. I also enjoyed the monologue at the very beginning, explaining the X-Men, because to the general audience. And yeah, that's overall, this is a very good movie. This is not a very good movie. It's decent. I recommend watching it. But that isn't the end. What did I not like about this movie? Number one, I know I just said I like that it's 2000, but the dialogue is incredibly corny here. Besides the heavy hitters being Magneto, Professor X, and Wolverine, the dialogue is very cringy with every other character. And I also thought Rogue was just very annoying. I'm not gonna lie. Her actor did the best she could. But man, the constant whining, constant crying, constant screaming, from her screaming in the bar to her screaming when she gets taken away by Magneto up on the Statue of Liberty. Man, the screaming was just so annoying. But I think y'all have been waiting for me to criticize the love triangle. This was the worst part of this movie. It was genuinely disgusting to watch this. Cyclops, Jean, and Wolverine fighting Cyclops and Wolverine fighting over Jean was just not fun to watch. It was incredibly cringy, and I just did not like it. By far the worst part of this movie, and it definitely hurts the movie more than it helps it. It doesn't help it at all, by the way. But that's my only, I have a bunch of smaller criticisms like I mentioned before, but that's my only major criticism with this movie. But now that X-Men 1 is out of the way, let's talk about my childhood movie, X-Men 2, United. As I stated previously, X-Men 2 United is a movie I have a quarrel with, you could say. My childhood, and definitely an improvement over X-Men 1, but there isn't much to say about it, right? It's X-Men 1, but a little better. I forgot to mention this with X-Men 1, but Cyclops was terrible. And this honestly goes with X-Men 2. Cyclops still sucks. He is not the leader he's supposed to be. He's not even brave. He's just a whiny brat. But I will say, his Jane's death is like his only good scene. Besides that, the actor is not even that good. I'm actually not even gonna praise the actor here. The actor still did a really bad job. And I get it. He wanted to be Superman, but like, man, come on, do a better job. I just did not. Cyclops was majorly disappointing. I saved this for X-Men 2 because, well, we all know what happens. We'll talk about what happens in X-Men Last Stand. But yeah, no, that was one of the worst parts of this movie. Another criticism I have, that's the love triangle is somehow worse. At this point, it's disgusting. Especially with the whole, we all know about, if you've seen these movies, which I hope you have, I hope I'm not spoiling this for you. We all know about the Rogue scene. That freaked me out as a kid. It still does. The love triangle here is just not the best thing in the world. But and I also have a criticism. I didn't like the Act 3 of the movie. I got the beginning of Act 3 with Charles being mind controlled and him not being able to free himself. Storm's got to free him. I didn't like that. Professor X is the most powerful mutant on the planet. Top 3 most powerful. It's him, Phoenix, and Magneto. Phoenix is probably a little more powerful, but like at the same time, man, you're gonna seriously tell me that Professor X can't unmind control? He's too powerful for conventional methods, but he can be mind controlled by a guy in a wheelchair, by another guy in a wheelchair. Come on, that explanation was just dumb, and it was a plot contrivance. I really, really didn't like that. But beside those 2 or 3 major criticisms, this is not a bad movie. I would give X-Men 1 a 7. I would give First Class like a 7, like a 7. X-Men Origins Wolverine like a 6. Or maybe even a 5, honestly. And then X-Men 1 like a 7.5. I give this movie an 8. This is solid. Definitely a solid movie. It still feels hella 2000s, but less so, and it's not even cringy. It's just a 2000s movie. If I had to compare this to an MCU movie, I would definitely compare it to... If I compare it to any MCU movie, I would compare it to Iron Man 3. Has its flaws, but I honestly really like it, and I'll defend it to the day I die. The smaller things, the suits have a few minor improvements. If you look at Wolverine's suit, it actually has some yellow on it now. I like that. I also like the progression of Jean's powers throughout the movie, how she becomes more powerful at the very beginning, and then that leads to her. And then that leads to her getting the Phoenix at the very end. I liked her sacrifice. I liked all that. I also really liked how Cerebro is well explained in this movie. Cerebro is the thing that Professor X uses for his mind, and I liked that being the main focus because no one really talks about how overpowered Cerebro is. I'm surprised that no one's broken into the X-Men mansion to get Cerebro in the comics or in the X-Men TV series. But yeah, I also really enjoyed seeing the full extent of Professor X's powers, the whole time freeze thing. I liked the way Nightcrawler was handled. I wish they had alluded to him being the son of Mystique, but it's whatever. Hugh Jackman is great as always. The cast here is definitely decent. And overall, this is not a bad movie in the slightest. It's the Iron Man 3 of the franchise. People really don't like it. I personally love it though. And it's my childhood, so I'm probably being a little blinded here. But yeah, this movie's kind of hard to talk about because the other movies I talk about for 5 or 6 minutes. This one's kind of tough. I'm kind of trying to make things up as I go here because it's just nothing to talk about. It's X-Men 1, but better. But yeah, this movie is not. It's kind of hard to talk about. It's decent. I recommend watching it, but it's not really a forgettable movie. But oh my god, the downgrade between this and Last Stand is wild. So let's talk about it. The Last Stand sees a major dip in quality from X-Men 2 United. I watched this movie as a kid, probably even more than X-Men 2 United, and don't get me wrong. It's an enjoyable enough movie. There are some things I really like about it. For example, Hugh Jackman, like always, is great. Although I'm starting to get sick of the movies focusing on Wolverine, he's still great. And I also really like the idea of posing the question, is the cure morally okay? Is it morally okay to force the cure on people? But that's pretty much the only good thing about this movie. This goes to where I think at least the first 2 movies were definitely like 8 out of 10. This is a solid 6, maybe even a 5. Comparing this to a movie, I would compare it to Thor: The Dark World just because it feels busy. It has the same exact tone, the same exact problems with like randomly shoving in characters, random deaths that weren't actually deaths. Like take for example, some of my criticisms with this movie, like how Professor X's death was just awful. Come on, man. No build up, no reason, just death, and then he's not even dead because he takes the body of that paraplegic person back, and then he's back in the next movie with no explanation. Like, come on, man. I love. We'll get into that later. I love Days of Future Past, but the explanation for Magneto and Professor X wasn't really good at all. Magneto was also awful in how he just got his powers back. Like, come on, man. The build up to that, just to like get rid of it. I get it. They wanted to have emotional impact without sacrificing anything, but that's not really a good thing to have. A bunch of small things I didn't like. I also really didn't like Cyclops and how he died. Like, this trilogy basically massacred Cyclops, but this is the worst of it. He just dies kissing Jean in a very gross looking scene. I'm sorry. And another thing I really didn't like, I didn't enjoy small things, right? The small things I didn't really enjoy was like Jean becoming evil without any build up. No build up towards it in the previous. They built up to the Phoenix, I'll give them that. But I didn't think the Phoenix, I know that a lot of times it doesn't turn her evil. It's the people around her that turn her evil, if that makes sense. But yeah, no, there are a bunch of bigger problems with this movie, but another small problem is just Beast's random inclusion. They wanted a diplomat, they wanted a political part to this movie, and they didn't know what character to put in that place, so they just brought in Beast. Beast actually makes sense that he'd be the political figure, but I didn't like his random inclusion. But beyond that, those are the small things I didn't like. What are some of the small things I liked about this movie? I like Storm being a major focus. I like Storm, and I liked her getting an actual like part of this movie. She was decent in this movie. Oro was decent in this movie. And that's about it. Now let's get into the major problems. The major problems is straight up, like, number one is the Cure overcomplicates the film to all hell. Instead of just focusing on Phoenix and focusing on Jean and focusing on the X-Men fracturing, now you're going to focus on the Cure. And that also leads to Magneto. Seeming like an actual villain. Like what, man? Like he's manipulating Jean. He's killing his fellow soldiers for no reason, his fellow mutants. And overall, man, he doesn't seem like a good guy in this movie in the slightest. Magneto is genuinely a bad guy in this movie. And that sucks, because for the most part, Magneto, in the past previous films, even First Class, seemed like a good guy who just was misguided. And in future films, he also feels like that. But here, it's just, man, he's just evil for the sake of being evil. That also leads to the Phoenix being rushed, because you gotta talk about Magneto, and the whole Mystique thing with her Cure being brought up from nowhere, and then her giving the ratting it out, which is like a major plot contrivance where she just gives up the location. But it's fake. That's what's so dumb. And overall, the Phoenix was rushed, and X-Men: The Last Stand is a very messy story. It's pretty obvious that they wanted to do a Phoenix storyline, but then last minute there were some changes with the Cure, and they had to rush it in at the very end. Jean is rushed, but I think the Cure is even more rushed. I also didn't like the inclusion of Archangel with him having like 3 scenes, and that's literally it. But if I'm being honest, this movie is probably in the top. It's probably the worst mainline X-Men movie. Like, it's definitely better. It's worse than X-Men Origins Wolverine for sure. And it's definitely worse, spoiler alert, than the other movies we watched. But yeah, speaking of those other movies, what's coming up next? Oh yeah, let's talk about the sequel to this movie, The Wolverine. The Wolverine is a movie I'm very conflicted on, because I really like the action scenes in this movie. It's much better than The Last Stand. Pretty much everything. It's nice to see movies in higher quality definition now that we're moving into the 2010s. Logan is still a great actor, and like I said before, the action scenes are top tier. From the scene at the funeral to before the final fight with and my words here, the CGI cluster. I also really enjoy the directing style of this movie. That comes back to the fight scenes though, because every fight scene, I love the hand-to-hand fight scenes here. This is a first for the X-Men movies to have hand-to-hand combat, and I really enjoyed it. To see Logan actually go beast mode, to see them attack the guy in his own home, to see all these hand-to-hand combat fights and ninja fights, it's pretty cool. Throughout the movie, I really did. There's only really one. There's like 5 fight scenes in this movie, and there's really only one bad one, and it's CGI, right? CGI is not great for fight scenes in general. The fight scenes here are really good. I also really liked the directing style of this movie. The way when Logan remembers the Japanese guy in the park, it fades into him in the back. I know it's very simple choreography, but it's good. It's very good choreography and cinematography. In general, just the directing style here is very good. The director was at the top of his game. This is better than average for superhero movie cinematography, and I really enjoyed it. But that's where the positives for this movie end, and that's why I'm so conflicted. One, this is an incredibly boring movie. This movie is incredibly boring. There's nothing really going on for most of the movie. It's more just go here, go there. It's very linear. No big plot twists. Nothing non-predictable. They try to lure you in with the bait and switch of the son killing the dad, or whatever, and then they reveal the dad is the bad guy all along, and that was just the dumbest thing I've ever seen. They butchered my man Silver Samurai, man. And that leads me to my second problem with this movie is Viper. She felt like she was rushed in last second. She really sucked. The CGI for her was terrible. She was weird. I didn't like how this movie did a triple cross. This movie was really, really messy for no apparent reason. And it felt like they shoved her in last minute because they needed an extra villain. But the biggest problem with this movie, it is an identity crisis. Act 1 is honor, redemption, Logan in America, in Japan. It's fun. I like Act 1. Act 1's not bad at all. It'd be like a 7 out of 10, which isn't great, but it's not bad either. It's better than average. And then we see Act 2, and Act 2 is where it gets super boring, and it defiles itself into a generic action movie where Logan must protect the girl. There's a three-way love romance. It's just freaking weird. I don't like it. I don't like the romance in this movie. I don't like anything else about this movie except the action and directing style. And then you get to Act 3. Act 3 shifts completely. Between Act 1 and 2, there's a big shift, but it's at least believable. Act 2 to Act 3 is just freaking insane. It goes from a cool ninja movie to in my words here, it'll be bleeped in post, a CGI cost. It is genuinely ridiculous the fact that this movie takes a complete 180 and goes from like a 6 out of 10 generic, boring, but acceptable movie. Like I could watch this with my family and be happy. Like it's a good distraction from other things. It's one of those movies you watch on a plane. And then we get Act 3 and it's like almost unwatchable. Triple cross. Son, then Viper, then Silver Samurai is the dad. Ooh. I saw it through the second Logan denied him the adamantium. I knew that they were gonna do that. I also really didn't like the explanation that Logan is gonna go to Magneto to get his claws back. Because at the same time, like, man, I don't know if that works like that. This movie just feels like it's kind of unnecessary because, like, we could have gone Last Stand to Days of Future Past. There's a pretty big gap between those movies, and it's really weird. But this movie just makes the gap even wider for me. And I think a Wolverine solo movie set in the X-Men mansion probably would have been better set, and it would have at least bridged the movies a little better. And I didn't like this movie at all. The CGI, the Logan himself, and the fight scenes and the choreography are really good. But everything else about this movie sucks. And it's crazy because they released this in 2013, and in 2014 we get quite possibly the best mainline X-Men movie. So let's talk about Days of Future Past. Dare I say it, Days of Future Past is a decent adaptation, at least in the very beginning of the movie. The opening is basically just one big fight scene where you see how the mutants who are usually super powerful are getting absolutely dogged on by the Centuries. I forgot what their name was. They're being killed and they're being decimated and they can't survive. It's a great change of pace to actually be comic accurate for once, even though I don't think comic accuracy is important. I'm also really happy that Logan's not the main focus this time around. I cut that part out. From that positive, there is a criticism that I'm sick of Logan being the main focus. Here, he should not have been the main focus. I feel like we should have gotten Storm as the main focus here. I understand the whole go back in time plot with Logan. I liked seeing Logan in the new timeline, but like, man, it's really annoying to have Logan be the main character for the sixth movie. We've literally had one movie so far that Logan has not been the main character, and that was probably one of the top. That's probably the second best movie we've watched so far. I'm just really sick of Logan being the main character. Another criticism I have is that the timeline is all screwed up. And the Wolverine who loses his claws and Charles is dead. Then they're alive in Days of Future Past. Really confusing. But the thing is, it's because there were post-credit scenes about Magneto getting his powers back and about Charles being alive. I just thought it was really dumb that they were going to do those and they were going to impact the universe that heavily, because those two being gone is massive. Literally massive. Just for them to backwalk everything I would have understood if they backwalked Magneto's powers, because I would have liked to see Magneto become leader of the X-Men. But to backwalk Charles' death is just such a dumb thing to do. I liked him in this movie, but you know what I mean? It's just so dumb. I also really enjoyed watching. I really enjoyed seeing the first class team again, because I liked the first class's acting and its characters. I also liked the darker themes about how the mutants got killed and how they didn't survive, and how Magneto apparently tried to. John F. Kennedy was a mutant. That was really cool. It was nice to see the old cast again, because overall, I prefer the old cast over the new. I prefer the young actors over the older actors, with the exception of Magneto and Professor X, which is funny because those are the two best actors in the new timeline as well. It was just really cool to see them. I also really enjoyed Quicksilver's like little action scenes and how he sprints everywhere. I loved the slow motion. We get more of it in Apocalypse, which is pretty cool. And the VFX for those are really well done. The way he just goes around dodging bullets. The way he just, like, you see the goofy comedy. This actor is great as Quicksilver. Like, seriously. Like, this Quicksilver actor is amazing. Very nice addition. And then I also really liked a lot also was Professor X's whole journey in this movie. I like seeing Professor X not be wise. And I like him having to own up to his mistakes, own up to what he did wrong, own up to Magneto, and just had to fight back against that. Mystique was also a pretty big thing. I liked the idea of I liked that final scene with Mystique not killing the professor or the president, and then also seeing. I liked the whole idea of Logan being sidelined at the very end and Professor X having to do his thing. That was probably the best moment of this movie. I also really liked the scenes with Storm and stuff. It was sad to see their deaths, but at the end of the day, it was very fun to watch, and it was actually cool to see a darker. At least the time of it was darker. In this movie in general, that's pretty much how I sum it up. It has small issues here and there. It's maybe not the best movie in the X-Men universe, but it's very, very good. Like top 3. It's very good. It's a very enjoyable movie. My eyes were glued the entire time. It's pretty fast paced. Pacing is a little weird, but overall it's fast paced. I like it. It's one of those movies where you can definitely watch it with the family, unlike a lot of the other X-Men movies. And I don't know. This movie had a special place in my heart. This is my, but beyond X-Men 1 and 2, I also owned this one as a kid. So, I'm not praising it because of nostalgia. I did rewatch it. It has its issues, but I really enjoyed it for the most part. It was very, very cool to see this movie again. I liked the past. I liked everything. My only issues being the timeline and how screwed up the timeline is. And also, I really didn't like Logan being the main character again. Like, I cannot stress that enough. I am sick of Logan being the main character for everything. He needs to take a step back. And luckily, in this entire video, we only have one more movie of Logan being the main character, and it's probably the best X-Men movie. But yeah, with that out of the way, at the end of this movie, the timeline is reset, and we go back to the first class, but this time it's different. Mutants are introduced more early, and there's a bunch of problems. So that leads us into talking about X-Men Apocalypse. X-Men Apocalypse is incredibly diverse and decisive in the community. Half of us like it, half of us hate it, half see it has issues, and the other half says it's just terrible and has no redeeming qualities. I'm on the first half. I think this movie's amazing, but it has its issues. First off, Cerebro is kind of getting annoying. It's a main focus in First Class. It's a main focus in almost every X-Men movie. And I am getting sick of seeing Cerebro. It's kind of a plot device. It's seriously a plot device. Like, to the point where it's a main focus in X-Men 2, it's a main focus in X-Men 1, it's a main focus in every single X-Men Mainline X-Men movie, and it's just to the point where stop putting it in the movies. I also thought the ending was incredibly rushed, and the final fight was whatever. I liked Eric's shift in character, but beside that, wasn't a massive fan of the ending. Although I did like the X-Men training. I also thought that the darker tones were cool, but they fell flat. They really did. The only dark part of the movie is Magneto, and it conflicts with the rest of the tone for the movie. Because the movie has a pretty weird tone. It's both light and flat. I would definitely compare it to something like The Incredible Hulk in terms of tone. Or more like Thor the Dark World, actually. But, yeah, comparing this to an MCU movie, I would probably compare this to Age of Ultron. Definitely great, has its issues, but definitely overhated by the community. And, I don't know. Besides those issues, besides the tone and Cerebro, there's plenty of things to like about this movie. I love Wolverine not being involved except for that one joke. It's like they psych you. They're like, he's here, he's the main character, psych, and they just get him out of there, and I love that. Semi leading the X-Men. I like Mystique's character in this movie. The way she's like reluctant to lead the X-Men, but they still bring her in. And she still, at the end of the day, ends up growing as a character. I like seeing Mystique get some character growth. That's something the X-Men movies were kind of missing, character growth. And that's something this new timeline kind of does a good job at. Nightcrawler is also heavily improved in X-Men 2. He's very bad here. I don't like him. He felt like very much like 97 Nightcrawler in X-Men 2, and he kind of just falls flat for me here. But, on that note, I really enjoyed the New Mutants that were here, like Scott, Nightcrawler, and Jubilee. Even though Jubilee she really had no voice lines, and she was more there for the fans, it was still pretty cool to see Jubilee. Like, seriously. Scott was also amazingly improved. He's still kind of a crybaby, and I still think he's better in the comics. But he's greatly improved here. Same with the Jean actor. I wanted to say I really didn't like the Jean actor here. Like, seriously. I did not like the Jean actor in X-Men. But here she's much better. She actually feels like she's acting. The other Jean actor kind of just felt like a Facebook mom. I also really enjoyed Eric and Professor X. The actors are once again amazing. These are the best actors for these characters, I think. Except for, Patrick, I don't know. Because Patrick is a great actor. And I like the way he portrays older Professor X. But as a younger Professor X, I can't get past these two actors, man. They're so good. For me, they're my Professor X and Magneto. It's great. This movie in general is just genuinely fun to watch. I can't explain it. I shouldn't like it. It has its issues. But at the end of the day, man, it's good. I also really liked Quicksilver and his scene in the X-Men tower, in the X-Men mansion. That was pretty cool. It was cool to see him. It was once again cool to see a slow motion scene. And that was fun. Although I will say the timeline is also kind of messed up in this movie because it's supposed to be 10 years later. Yet they're using the same actors and they don't look any older. Because these movies came out a year apart. So the X-Men, the Wolverine, or Days of Future Past and Apocalypse came out about 2 years apart. So these movies were filmed about a year and a half apart. So they really didn't age a lot. The only character that I thought kind of aged a little bit was Pietro, which is Quicksilver. And I thought, yeah, that's about it. It's the only character I thought kind of aged a little bit. They all act basically the same, and it just hasn't felt like 10 years have passed, at least for me personally. But that's the really only big issue with this movie. This movie is just incredibly enjoyable across the board. But overall, I enjoyed this movie. Like, you gotta understand. You cannot turn your brain off sometimes, and you gotta enjoy a movie for what it is. This is one of those movies, turn off your brain, enjoy it. I'd compare it to the first Ant-Man movie. I know it's a weird comparison, but trust me on that. It feels a lot like the first Ant-Man movie. And overall, I'm liking this new timeline. This new timeline's great, but hold that thought. We haven't covered X-Men Dark Phoenix yet. Dark Phoenix is a major step in the wrong direction. Take everything you liked about X-Men Apocalypse and throw it out the window. And take everything you didn't like about X-Men Apocalypse and put it times 100. Random villain at the end? Boom. Random character turn? Boom. Unnecessary character death? Boom. This movie is just incredibly mid, and it sucks because I really enjoyed X-Men Apocalypse, but nah, this movie's a major step back. First off, Mystique's death is very underwhelming, for being honest. I really wish he had gotten an actual hero's death rather than just being killed for the sake of love. It sucks, man. I can't explain it. Her death was very meh. Didn't really give me an emotional impact that I thought it was. I didn't know she was going to die. So this was the perfect time to give me some emotional impact in these movies, and it failed. It really did. I also thought this movie was just incredibly hard to get through. Charles in general is just really a douchebag. He only stops being a douchebag at the very end of the movie. And it's weird because I like Charles up to this point. He's been the one character that's consistently been really good. But then no, they butchered him as well. I also thought that I really didn't like Magneto taking a step back. I understand they killed his family. But like, bro, come on. He was like living on his own peacefully and you had to come out and mess with him. Let the man live. I'm kind of sick of Magneto having to be in every X-Men movie as well. Like, come on, man, have a different villain for once. He also just joins their side within half an hour, which was incredibly weird in general. And yeah, the Phoenix is not built up to either in Apocalypse. They don't really touch on the Phoenix at all until now. This is somehow worse than The Last Stand in terms of how I think this movie handles the Phoenix better than The Last Stand, but the build-up is somehow worse. In general, this movie is just a major step down. It's really hard to get through in general. I found myself trying to turn off the movie time and time again, but then I kept saying to myself, man, you got like a week to make this video. Come on, get this done. And then I pulled through and finished it. It's a very generic movie too. And overall, it's just a major step down. The alien plot was also really dumb and how they just come in at the end for the Phoenix. It reminds me of how they did it in the comics, but it's still really weird that they just decided to put aliens at the very end. No build up, no explanation. They're just evil for the sake of being evil, and I was not appreciative of that. I kind of wish they had like made an interesting villain. I would have preferred if Phoenix was a villain for the entire thing. They could have definitely made Phoenix work as the villain, but instead they decided to put in some half-baked aliens in at the very end. And the ending is also a very big CGI mess. It's just not fun to watch. This movie makes me sad because I freaking loved Apocalypse, and I watched this movie immediately following Apocalypse. So it kind of sucks how I went from having 2.5 hours of fun to about 2 hours of hell. This movie is just genuinely it's a cluster. It's just not fun to watch. It's one of those movies that's like meh. You walk out of the theater and you're like, what the hell did I just watch? That's basically what happened to me when I finished watching this movie. Everything in this movie is just so underbaked. This movie could have helped. What could help this movie is if there was like an extra 30 minutes to it. They could have built up the Phoenix a little more. There's 3 things I would have done to help this movie. Number 1 is I would have gotten rid of the aliens and I would have had the Phoenix be the main villain. Number 2 is I would have killed Mystique at the very end and I would have had that death be, rather than it being Jean's, I like it being Jean's fault, but I kind of wish they had built up to it a little more. So I would have, number 1 is I would have moved Mystique's death to the very end of the movie. Number 2 is I would have had Eric try to kill the Phoenix. I think it's a good idea, but I would have had him try to kill the Phoenix throughout the movie. And then 3, I would have added maybe 30 to 40 more minutes to the movie, and I would have had them actually build the Phoenix a little more, and then have that middle act last a little longer. Because Act 3 is like 30 minutes, Act 1 is like an hour, and then Act 2 is like 25 minutes. It's a mess. The pacing is also pretty bad with this movie. It goes from being incredibly slow. It goes from being pretty fast-paced at the beginning to incredibly slow-paced at the very middle to very fast-paced at the end. The pacing here is just a mess. That's another criticism I have of this movie. This just sucks because I loved Apocalypse. So to see this movie fail this miserably, it's not a bad movie. It's just so generic. It's such a generic superhero movie. And to think this came out after Deadpool, which we'll get to in a little bit, was great. So it's crazy how this movie failed this spectacularly, especially compared to Apocalypse and First Class and even Deadpool. It's wild how, like, this is by far the worst movie in the first trilogy. First Class is okay, decent, I would say. Apocalypse was genuinely very, very good, and then Phoenix just falls flat. And it sucks because I freaking loved Apocalypse. But now that we've talked about the mainline X-Men movies, it's time to talk about Deadpool. Deadpool surprised me because this is one of the few movies that during this video that I had never watched before. Those movies being the Wolverine, X-Men Origins Wolverine, and both Deadpools. In First Class. I've seen the other 7 movies. But in particular, Deadpool was pretty good. it's a good movie. I think it's slightly overrated, but it's a solid 8 out of 10. Comparing it to a movie, I would compare it to something similar to, I want to say, probably Spider-Man No Way Home levels of quality. It's pretty good. It's very good. In general, it's a very solid story. There's not really a lot of fractures here. It's a solid story. I like how it's not connected to anything else. It's its own self-contained adventure, and I really like that. It's something that superhero movies need, especially Marvel needs more nowadays. Self-controlled adventures that it's one of maybe a few characters. This is also one of the funniest movies I have ever watched. Genuinely, I'm not a fan of the raunchy humor, like the sex jokes and stuff. Not my type of comedy. But what I really found funny was like the a little example for Deadpool 2, because these are basically the same types of comedy. Deadpool 2, the Martha joke was freaking hilarious.
You're right. I was fighting a caped bat. But then we discovered his mom is named Martha too.
No.
All the references to the X-Men and how the jokes about how they couldn't afford another X-Men. Overall, Deadpool is a very funny movie. This is a very, very funny movie, especially for a comic book fan. That's this movie's number one strength, the comedy. I also really liked Ryan Reynolds as Deadpool. I said this during the X-Men Origins Wolverine, but Ryan Reynolds was made for the role of Deadpool. The acting is just ripped right out of the comics. I cannot wait for him to be in the MCU with Deadpool 3 and to see him interact with Spider-Man. That's going to be so great. This actor, Ryan Reynolds, did an amazing job, genuinely. I am full-heartedly shocked that he did this good of a job with Deadpool. And I've seen the trailers for Deadpool 3, so I knew he was going to do a good job. But man, this is just freaking amazing. The Deadpool suit, speaking of amazing, the Deadpool suit is also really, really good. I like how it's still darker, but it's colorful. I like it. The mask is really cool, and in general, it's really good. The action's also really good. I really enjoyed the action scenes throughout this movie. The directing style is very good. I was a very big fan of the VFX in this movie as well. The VFX is a little shaky at certain shots, but overall, it's pretty good. And also, this movie has great pacing as well. Like, seriously. The pacing of this movie is excellent. I also really enjoyed the side characters being Mega Teenage something Warhead. That's been a meme on the internet for a freaking long time. And I'll play it here.
And you are...
Negasonic Teenage Warhead.
Negasonic Teenage... What the shit? That's the coolest name ever!
So it was really cool to see that, that joke actually play out. Overall, this is just a really enjoyable movie. The action's good. Ryan Reynolds, I'm going to be gushing over this for the next two movies because, oh my freaking god, Wade Wilson as Ryan Reynolds. Oh my freaking god. It's literally, for me at least, and this is going to sound absolutely insane, but Ryan was made for the role like Robert Downey Jr. was made for Iron Man. It's true. Ryan Reynolds is up there with, maybe not the performance, but the actual comic accuracy, he's up there. Captain America isn't quite up there, but he's still pretty good. Overall, just like those, man. Thor, he's also up there with Thor. He's a really good actor, and I'm Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin, and I'm just shocked that he did this good of a job with the character of Deadpool. And that's this movie's biggest strength. This movie, I don't know, because I liked it a lot. Like I've been gushing over it for the last 4 minutes. But man, I felt like it was missing something. Wade is a very likable character, by the way, as well. I want to point that out quickly. Wade is a very likable character. I like how he's trying to grow. I like how he isn't stagnant. I like how Deadpool's character is growth, but not grow at the same time. But in general, this movie felt like it was missing that oomph that made other movies special. It's missing that one. I don't know what it is. I can't tell you guys what it is, but it's missing something. Just something. It's missing something tiny. I don't know what it is. But it's something that it's a small piece. It's one puzzle piece. If it had that puzzle piece, it has the great action. It has the comedy. It has the amazing acting. It has the good characters. It just needs that one something. I think that something is depth. This movie is great, but it's not a super deep movie. But overall, I mean, I freaking loved. I mean this with all of my heart. I genuinely freaking loved this movie. This movie is something special. And I look forward to watching Deadpool 2, and especially Deadpool and Wolverine. But But yeah, speaking of Deadpool 2, let's talk about that. Deadpool 2 is a pretty big improvement on the first movie. That Deadpool 2 is missing, which was depth. The death of Vanessa is played as a joke, but in general, it's really cool to see Deadpool 2, and especially it's cool to see Logan. It's especially cool to see Wade grow as a character, and I also really enjoyed the fourth wall breaking. It was good in the last movie, but it was freaking crazy in this movie, with Batman being mentioned and Martha being mentioned, and it was just so much freaking fun to see the freaking references. This movie, I didn't think it could get funnier, but somehow it got funnier. This is the funniest movie I've ever watched, and I mean that. This is incredibly funny. This is peak comedy. This movie is like actually peak comedy. I also thought the fourth wall breaking, but was pretty good. The way we talk about Logan's release and the way, yeah, it's pretty good. I also really enjoyed the way Wade grew throughout this movie. I really enjoyed his growth with Vanessa, the scenes with him in his mind with Vanessa. I really enjoyed Cable. Cable was well done in this movie. I really, really enjoyed the side characters as well. Colossus and the whole gay, jokey gay romance was a lot of fun. I really liked, I'm going to call her Warhead because I'm sick of saying the entire name. She's pretty good in this movie too. I really, again, Wade, once again, Ryan Reynolds knocks it out of the park. This is a slightly better performance than the last movie. Mind you, it's not that big of a difference, but it's still when his performance is already peak, there's nothing beyond the peak, right? There's just the heavens. And he's not quite in the heavens, but he's in the peak. He's peak. He really is. I really, really like Wade. The acting is also good overall between everybody. Juggernaut was pretty fun. I heard that's voiced by Ryan Reynolds. Couldn't tell, but I think it is. That's pretty cool. In general, this movie only has one issue though. It's the pacing. It's a little worse than the pacing is a little worse than Deadpool 1. I didn't like the way the pacing went from assembling. I didn't like the way it went from assembling the team. I also really liked the whole team joke and the luck. Domino was a lot of fun. I do hope she returns at least a little bit in Deadpool 3. She deserves to return. It was just a lot of fun to see Domino's powers in Circle and how she survived literally everything with zero effort. It's great. I also really enjoyed the whole team dying. That was a lot of fun. The gore in this movie is used for comedic effect, unlike the first movie, so I really enjoyed that. The combat here is also, in the fight scenes are definitely slightly improved as well. Really enjoyed to see. There was that sword combat, which was disappointing, but it was still pretty cool. I liked seeing him fight the guys at the very beginning. I liked how his arrogance and his stupidity led to Vanessa's death. And I just liked this movie. This is very, very good. This is, besides Logan, which, spoiler alert, Logan's the best movie made by the Xbox X-Men movies. This is probably the second best one. This Deadpool 1, Logan, and Days of Future Past, along with Apocalypse, those are the 5 best movies. They're all very... Apocalypse is a pretty big step down from Days of Future Past and Deadpool 1. But it's still pretty good. I don't know, man. There's something about this movie that you can't help but love. The performances, the comedy, it's just it has that puzzle piece that Deadpool 1 was missing, and I really appreciate that, because I said before, Deadpool 1 was missing that oomph that made Deadpool in the comics special for me, and this movie has that. It has everything that I thought the Fox X movies were missing. It has a character with main depth. It has a coherent storyline. It has coherent character growth. The joke with the Fox X-Men, and that's why this is why this is set in the same timeline as the new timeline, because you see the X-Men. I almost put this one after Logan, because I thought it was set in a different timeline, but then that Fox X-Men joke came in, I was like, yeah, this is set in the same timeline, which is weird because they don't allude to previous events. But I get this on purpose to keep Logan and everything else separate from Deadpool. And I'm very, very happy that they decided to do that, because I am sick of seeing Logan as the main character. I'm so happy to be seeing Deadpool in the front, leading his team, leading the X-Force, who all immediately die a very gruesome death, with the exception of Domino. And in general, this is an incredibly good movie. I highly recommend, if you're going to take one takeaway from this entire video, I recommend watching Deadpool 1 and 2 and Logan. Those are the 3 best movies, and they're the 3 ones that are disconnected, so you can watch them without fear of retribution by comic book fans. There obviously those three are universally loved by comic book fans. And man, I don't know. This is my first time watching Deadpool 1 and 2, and I'm so shocked that I did not watch these movies previously, because they are chef's kiss, man. They are masterpieces. But yeah, I've gushed over Deadpool, but let's talk about a movie I've already seen. Let's talk about Logan. I was not expecting this death to hit this hard. Logan is an interesting movie because straight up, I haven't seen it since 2019, and I also didn't really understand the X-Men movies that I had watched up to that point because I'd only seen half of them. Like I said, this entire video is my first time watching the Wolverine, X-Men Origins Wolverine, Deadpool, Apocalypse, Phoenix. It's my first time watching these movies. So when I rewatched Logan, I was going in expecting it to be the same as it was before, but absolutely not. Logan's death in this movie hit so incredibly hard. To me, it hit almost as hard as Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man death. Like, I seriously mean it. This death hit me like a truck, especially when I don't know her name, but when the girl, I'm gonna call her. I know Wolverine. I know Wolverine's X10 project. Yeah, no, he's Project X, so he's Project 10. She's X23, I think, and then the clone is X24. When X23 puts the X on Wolverine's grave to go, it means multiple things. It means X-Men, X Project, that moment was with Iron Man's death, it hit hard. That entire scene hit hard. In particular with Logan, it was that one moment, that 10 seconds that hit so incredibly hard. And also Logan saying this line.
This is what it feels like.
He basically says, this is what it feels like. And I'm thinking he's talking about death and loving somebody. And man, that brought a genuine tear to my eye. Usually I watch these movies and then it's the next day when I record it because I'm kind of busy. I have a life. But today I had a bunch of time. Besides going into work a little bit, I basically just had a bunch of free time. So I figured that I would record and I would watch Logan today. And man, I watched this 20-30 minutes ago and it's still I'm speechless. This was an incredibly good movie. First up, let's talk about and I mean this with wholeheartedly, the very few negatives I have with the movie Logan, because this is an incredible movie. This is the best X-Men movie, flat out, and I don't think it's close. I'm not gonna lie. A problem I had was they don't really do a good job of explaining things in this movie. I know it's a weird complaint to have, but they don't for example, it's brought to the person that basically it was the adamantium that was poisoning Wolverine, but it was also the food and stuff and how that was suppressing his X gene. That's the main reason he died. He would have lived another 150 years if it wasn't for the adamantium, if it wasn't for the poisoning. And they also don't do a good job of explaining how Professor X killed the X-Men. They don't really do a good job of explaining any of that. It's kind of just hinted at, and that's what I don't like. That is my only complaint about this movie, though. But now, time for the positives. Number one is I'm so happy this movie was rated R. This movie would not have been even close to as good if it was PG-13. This is a good example of a movie that needs to be rated R. Same with the Deadpool movies too. This movie, its action, its gore, its emotion, its themes, all of it needed to be rated R. It hits so incredibly hard. This is one of those movies that I feel needed to be rated. If this movie wasn't rated R, it would not have been as good. This movie also has incredibly good pacing. It starts off incredibly slow, but then it speeds up and speeds up and speeds up, and then it sticks at a medium pace. What's the song go? At a medium pace? Basically for the entire half the movie, which I did enjoy. And then I also want to say the motion here is really good. I was tearing up while even talking about Logan in this video. But I also want to say there's the part with Professor X's death and X-23 holding Logan's hand. There's the scene where they're speaking to each other and she drives. There's the scene the albino guy dies. There's a bunch of good emotion in this movie. And this is probably one of the most deep movies I've ever had the pleasure of watching. Because, seriously, if you have not... Look, I know it's not required for Deadpool 3, but if you have not seen Logan, go ahead and watch it. It'll give you a new appreciation for the character of Wolverine. And then lastly, my last really interesting thing about this movie is this is easily, and I mean easily, Hugh Jackman's best performance as Wolverine. And I mean that. The finale, the scene where he's yelling at X-23, the scene where he's like helping Charles, like this is like a Wolverine who's down on his luck, fed up. The scene where he talks about how everyone in here gets hurt. Like, man, this is Hugh Jackman's best performance by a mother freaking mile. And I mean that. I mean that by wholeheartedly. The emotion, the performance, the action. This movie comes together to be... This is a great example of why I love cinema. And I don't mean superhero movies, because for me, this is not a superhero movie. I know this is based on a superhero, based on a comic, but this is not. I think of this as a post-apocalyptic movie. That's what I think it is. And this is not a superhero movie. This is a good example of cinema at its best. This is Wolverine. This isn't quite the X-Men at its best, but this is Wolverine, and this is movies and the art of making a movie at its best. And I wholeheartedly mean that, and this is a massive recommend for me. This is the best X-Men movie besides it's better than both the Deadpool movies and X-Men Apocalypse, and I mean that. But yeah, that's every single X-Men movie we've covered. I guess it's time to talk about my overall thoughts, isn't it? My thoughts on the X-Men movies overall is weird. When the series is at its best, it's peak cinema. You have Deadpool 1 and 2, you have Logan. When it's slightly worse, you have Apocalypse, X-Men 2, still decent and good movies. When it's at its worst, you have atrocities to humanity like The Last Stand, The Wolverine. Straight up, this series has its ups and downs. But it has its moments too. I think my overall thoughts on the X-Men series all together can be summed up. It's high when it's high, but it's low when it's low. This series it's not the MCU, at least a general quality of being like a 7. The overall is like a 7.5 out of 10 or an 8 out of 10. With this series, you can't really pin down a number because you have the highs, like 10 out of 10s with Logan's, the lows with like the worst movie in the series is probably The Last Stand, and that's at like a 3 or like a 5 out of 10. So the average would technically be like a 6. Overall, but yeah, there are more hits here than there are bad. The bad movies, in my opinion, is Origins, The Last Stand, The Wolverine, and Dark Phoenix. There's 4 really bad movies here, but then there's also 4 amazing movies and 2 really good movies. So there's the 2 Deadpools and Logan, like I've been saying, but there's also Apocalypse. Those 4 are downright amazing. And then the other 3, which would be X-Men 1, X-Men 2, and the First Class are decent. So there are more good movies here. There are definitely way more good movies than there are bad movies. There's more positives than negatives. But overall, the series does have a few negatives that kind of stick throughout the entire thing. But there are also a few positives. One positive I'll give the entirety of the series is Professor X. He is a hit in every single movie. With the exception of Dark Phoenix, he's a hit in every other movie he's in for me. I love him in every other movie. Another positive throughout the entire thing is Magneto. Magneto freaking slaps, especially the younger actor. Is genuinely amazing at what he does, and I mean that. Like, that actor is at his peak right now. And then another positive throughout them is Logan. Logan is the best part of the bad movies. He's the best part of Last Stand. He is the best part of the Wolverine. He's the best part of X-Men Origins Wolverine. He is the best part of every single bad movie in the series. And he's also the best part of every good movie. He's the best part of X-Men 2. He's the best part of the Logan. But in my opinion, there are some negatives with the series as well. Number one is anyone else sick of seeing Logan as a character in every movie? He's only a non-main character in 5 out of the 12 movies. He's a main character in X-Men Origins Wolverine, X-Men 1, X-Men 2, The Last Stand, The Wolverine, Days of Future Past, and Logan, which is 6 out of the 12 movies. So he's a main character in half of the movies, which is downright ridiculous. He's only not a main character in First Class, Apocalypse, Dark Phoenix, Deadpool 1, Deadpool 2, and that's about it, which is wild. Because overall, I like Deadpool. I like the Wolverine. But I'm, like, sick of seeing him. Another negative I have with the entire series is Cerebro. Like, Cerebro is a major plot contrivance every single time he's introduced. It's just, oh, I can read everyone's mind. I can find Jean, which they do twice, by the way. Or, I can solve this problem with Cerebro, and then it ends up backfiring or something, and every single time it's introduced. And it's annoying. It really is. That's honestly, for me, a bigger net negative than Wolverine, because at least Wolverine is fun to watch. At least Logan is fun to watch, right? At least Wolverine as a character is interesting. I don't want to see Cerebro in every single X-Men movie. Another net negative that I have is also, I think personally, character shifts. In one movie, Logan will be doing better. He'll be great. And then in the next movie, he'll be falling apart. And the cycle goes 24/7, which I understand. It's like, oh, and especially with the Wolverine, like, oh, Jean died. I'm sad. But, man, he shouldn't have fallen. He should not have fell fully apart in that movie. And I don't really agree with the direction he took Logan in that movie. And then, this isn't really a negative, but it's more an observation. It's weird how the quality dips. Like, you think, like, X-Men 2 was great. Then you get The Last Stand and Wolverine in a row. At least in the timeline-wise, by the way, because The Last Stand, and then how it released was it was Last Stand, and then it was X-Men Origins Wolverine. But even that point, those are some of the X-Men Origins Wolverine is probably the most mid movie in the X-Men series, following a bad movie, and then after that you get First Class, which is really good or decent, and then you get the Wolverine, which is I don't think it's the worst, but it's my least favorite movie, and then you have Days of Future Past, which is amazing. Like, yeah. Days of Future Past, Apocalypse, 2 Deadpools, and Logan are the 6 best movies. I really can't choose between Days of Future Past and Apocalypse. I think Days of Future Past is way better than Apocalypse. I just keep forgetting that Days of Future Past exists. Because it's a great movie, but it's a very forgettable movie. It had the best of Magneto, it had the best of Professor X, but overall it's just a forgettable movie, especially because I was busy that day. But yeah, this series has a lot of negatives, but it also, like I said before, has a lot of positives. I like Wolverine as the main character. I think especially the later movies are very funny. I liked a lot about it. I liked although I didn't like how they didn't do comic accuracy very often, I really enjoyed how they kind of dumbed down X-Men for the general audience. Because remember, comic book fans are not even 1% of the planet. There's not even 1% of us. Moviegoers, I would say about 10% are actual like comic book fans, and the rest of them are just average people. My parents, my little brother, for example, they don't understand anything about Old Man Logan. They don't understand anything about Deadpool, but they just like the movies and they want to go see Deadpool and Wolverine. Right? I think as someone who like is making an hour and like 15-minute video on X-Men to celebrate Deadpool and Wolverine's release, I have to be the one to catch him up. I'm gonna have to tell him to watch. I'm probably have to tell him to watch Deadpool 1, Deadpool 2, X-Men Origins Wolverine. That's about it. Those are the 3 you have to watch. But yeah, overall, I really enjoyed the series. Overall, this was a positive experience for me. The lows were really low, but man, Deadpool, Logan, Days of Future Past, X-Men 2, Apocalypse, those movies make it worth this series. I highly recommend. This video is coming out July 21st, so it is a little too late. But I recommend after you see Deadpool and Wolverine, go back and binge the X-Men series. I think that's what's gonna happen for most people. Go back and binge the X-Men series. It's better than you remember. This series gets too much flack, I think, especially just because the MCU and the high standard superhero movies are held to now. But man, was the series good. I seriously enjoyed watching it. Alright, but with all my thoughts on the X-Men movies out of the way, how do I feel about each movie stacked up against the other? Okay, well, you're about to find out. Let's rank 12 X-Men movies. Number 12 is X-Men The Last Stand. This is going to be controversial because I don't like this movie. This movie does almost nothing good. The only positive I will give it is the cast is once again really good. But honestly, that is the only positive I have to give this movie. This movie just falls flat in every single way, and it rushes the Phoenix storyline, even more than Dark Phoenix, by the way, and that's just wild. Number 11 is The Wolverine. This is a movie that's pretty much divided in the community, but I personally really don't like it. It's boring. It's tonally deaf. Logan is the worst. This is probably his worst performance, which is wild. It's still really good, but it's his worst performance. The action scenes fall flat by the end. They're good, but they fall flat by the end. The only positive I will give this movie is the fight scenes from the first half. The first half of the movie is really good. And then I also will say that I really, really, really like the cinematography in this movie. It's probably a top 5 X-Men cinematography movie. At number 10 is going to be Dark Phoenix. Another controversial opinion. A lot of people will put Dark Phoenix below the Wolverine. I personally won't. The reason Dark Phoenix is bad is because, number one, it's such a boring movie, and they kill characters unnecessarily. I also think that for Magneto being in here 13 minutes, he is just way too flip-floppy with Charles. Against Charles. With Charles again. Now I'm friends with him and we're having tea. This movie reportedly was going to have a sequel. This is like part 1 of the Dark Phoenix saga out of 2. And that's why it feels sort of unfinished. But that doesn't actually excuse the movie. It's still incredibly boring. And I think it's only slightly, and I mean ever so slightly better than the Wolverine. At number 9 is X-Men Origins Wolverine. This movie is often said to be the worst one. I don't think so. My problem with this movie is it's very messy, but it has its positives, I guess. Hugh Jackman's still good here. I like Sabretooth. Deadpool before he's actually Deadpool, so just Wade, is interesting enough. I don't mind him at all. And this is where we got Ryan Reynolds' Deadpool for the first time, and hell, you'll see later, I love that version of Deadpool. Overall, this movie just honestly conflicts me a ton because a part of me really hates it, and a part of me thinks, oh, it's ever so slightly okay. But this is still a okay improvement against Dark Phoenix. Dark Phoenix is just straight up boring. There was 1 or 2 moments I enjoyed in here. At number 8 is going to be First Class. The X-Men: The First Class. This movie is decent, but it has its issues. Number 1 is they kill off the guy who can adapt to anything, like he's a sheep, and that's, for me at least, really dumb that they just killed him off like that. I'm also not really a big fan of the way they resolve the movie. I liked what Magneto's speech, but I just wasn't a fan of anything else his character did. And this is the first movie I watched. It's been about 2 weeks since I've seen this, and I'm already forgetting what's happened. This is probably the second most forgettable movie in the franchise under Dark Phoenix. At number 7, we're going to have X-Men 1. This movie, the reason this is number 7, and I feel bad about it, is because, straight up, it's not as good as the other ones. It's decent. It's not a bad experience at all. Like I said, it's in the second half. If you didn't know, yeah, it's just below the second half. And that's because the X-Men series really only had, for me at least, 6 really good movies, and then the other 6 were mid to bad. This movie is mid to bad. It had its moments, but the cast doesn't shine as bright as they used to. They shine brighter in X-Men 2 and even The Last Stand. Logan is cool, but I don't like Rogue. And it does a good job of introducing the X-Men to general audiences, yet refuses, even more than X-Men 2 and like other movies, it refuses to pull from the comics for some reason. Fun fact, and I said this before in the intro, comic books are banned on set, which is actually insane. The director oh my god. That's really dumb. That's such a stupid thing to say. At number 6, we're going to have X-Men 2. This is the first time we get a substantial jump. X-Men 2 is genuinely pretty good. I don't like the over-reliance on Cerebro. I don't like some of the cinematography decisions, and I don't like Jean's random death at the end. But I do like Logan's backstory being explained here. It's the best. This movie does the best job of explaining it, unlike Origins or The Wolverine. I'm also a pretty big fan of the cast in this movie. For some reason, the cast is a lot more bright in this movie. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just me. This is also a much more enjoyable movie than X-Men 1, and it has its set pieces. The dam, when Jean fights Scott, Wolverine versus that weird girl, which I think is supposed to be his love interest or whatever from the comics. This movie definitely has its moments, and it's fun to watch, but I do have issues with it as well. It feels hella 2000 still, Cerebro. And overall, decent movie, and it's definitely recommended. This is the first movie I can say that I recommend people watch. Maybe First Class and X-Men 1. That's a maybe. This movie I can definitively say you should go watch it. At number 5 is going to be X-Men Apocalypse. This is the opinion that's going to get me hanged. I enjoyed this movie. you can't stop me from enjoying this movie. Although the darker themes fall flat, I still enjoyed them for the most part. Although I don't like the way Storm just changes sides at the very end, I don't care. I thought the themes of this movie were really good. I thought it was an incredibly enjoyable movie, and for me, this is the first movie that felt like comics X-Men. This is going to be the opinion that gets me hanged. Probably, I'll probably put this opinion in community tab just for fun. But I can already see people getting dislikes for this opinion alone, because most people would put this movie as the second worst, along with Dark Phoenix. I don't think so. I don't think these movies get enough credit. They're not cheesy, which automatically I'm against 2000 cheesy movies. I know a lot of people like them, but I don't like them. So if a movie's cheesy, it automatically gets less points from me. Number 4, Deadpool. There's a pretty big jump here. X-Men 2. There was a pretty big jump from X-Men 2 United and X-Men 1. It went from like a 6.5 out of 10 to like a 7.5 out of 10. And same with Apocalypse. And then from Apocalypse to Deadpool, it's a jump from a 7.5 to an 8. And the next 4 movies are pretty closely knit in terms of quality. I really enjoy Deadpool. This video was my first time watching it, and I already want to rewatch it. Ryan Reynolds is great as Wade Wilson. Vanessa is great. Colossus is great. I love this version of Colossus. Mega Teenage Sonic Warhead, or whatever you want to call her, she's freaking amazing. She's better in Deadpool 2, but she's still great here. The cast is great. The jokes, they fall flat at certain points, but they're still really, really good. And I don't know. There's really nothing more to say. This is a movie you can't really talk about. This is a movie I'd never review by itself, but it's a movie I can confidently say is too much fun for its own good. I had a lot of fun watching this one. Number 3 is going to be Days of Future Past. This movie is another pretty big jump from Deadpool. It goes from being Deadpool for me is an 8. This is an 8.5, maybe even a 9. I would actually give this movie a 9. This movie is a lot of fun. Wolverine is great in here. I'm sick of him being the main character. Eric's speech at the end, better than First Class, that's for sure. I liked Charles in this movie and his growth. I like seeing him not being the master of everything. I like seeing him searching for answers. My favorite moment in this movie by far is when he's talking to his older self. I loved seeing the X-Men get killed. That was awesome. And I loved everything about this movie. This was a movie I really enjoyed. Like, it was great coming back to this. I watched this movie a lot as a kid. I don't have nostalgia for it like I do with X-Men 1, X-Men 2, The Last Stand, but I still do freaking love this movie. And it's great. Seriously, like, this is a really, really good movie. Number 2, we have Deadpool 2. Pretty much equal with Days of Future Past. Comparing it to Deadpool 1, it's much funnier. The action's a little better, especially the very beginning. The cast is much better. I know a lot of people don't like the X-Force being canned immediately, but I thought that was freaking hilarious. And this isn't an X-Force. I know it was marketed as one, but this isn't an X-Force movie. This is a Deadpool movie. And yeah, this movie is surprisingly hated. Like, I'm looking at the new Rockstar ranking. This is not one of the worst X-Men movies. I don't know what new Rockstar was thinking. In fact, that entire new Rockstar ranking is actually insane and it's terrible. But that's not for this video. Deadpool 2 was a very, very enjoyable movie, and I will never understand the criticisms with it. Number 1, though, is Logan. This is a 10 out of 10. This is freaking amazing. I talked about this movie for like 6 minutes during the video. I talked about it more when I was talking overall, and there's not really much more to say. It's a great movie. That's all I have to say about it. It's great. Everything is good about this movie. My only criticism is how they explain things in the movie. It's a little wonky. Reminds me like the way Tears of the Kingdom gives you the memories. It's like all over the place and doesn't really coherently give it to you. But overall, this is the best X-Men movie. Probably top 3 superhero movies. This is up there across the Spider-Verse. This is up there with The Dark Knight. This is up there with Avengers Infinity War. This is up there as one of the best movies of all time for me. But with that out of the way, thank you guys for watching. This is the last part of the video I'm recording, as it's the 19th and I have to get this video rendering so that it can come out by tomorrow morning. But yeah, thank you guys for watching. Seriously, if you liked this video, I don't really know what to recommend you. I will have, on the end card, I will have a bunch of videos that I can recommend you. On the left, I'm going to have my In Defense of TASM 2, as that is a Marvel video, and that is a one I really want to do well. On the right, I'm going to have my recent Switch video, as it did really well, and it's one of the best videos on my channel. And at the bottom, I'm going to have my most recent video that YouTube wants to recommend you. But yeah, If you like this video, like, subscribe with the bell. As I said at the beginning of the video, every Saturday at 7 p.m. you can check out some of my thoughts, come in, chat, talk about movie news. This week, as you guys are seeing this video, the day this comes out, we're going to be ranking costumes, and that's going to be a lot of fun. And in the future, I want to do debates, I think, which would be really fun, which you get an actual small following. But with all that out of the way, this video was super tough to make. I am going to watch Spectacular Spider-Man and go relax. So, stay electric.